From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
Our series of General Assembly debates continues this week on Newsmakers. On November 6th, voters on the east side of Providence, House District 4, will be making a choice that could have statewide repercussions. Will they let House Speaker Gordon Fox keep his seat or go in a new direction with independent Mark Binder? Fox, a Democrat, has been a state representative for 20 years. A lawyer, he became Speaker in 2010. Binder is an author and runs a small independent publishing house. He ran an unsuccessful bid against former Congressman Patrick Kennedy in 2004. Fox, Binder, head-to-head on this week's Newsmakers. Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. I will be moderating this debate and asking questions along with our panel. WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi and political reporter for Rhode Island Public Radio, Ian Donnis. Good morning, everyone, and thank you both for agreeing to come on the program.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, Tim.
We're going to begin first with this opening question, simple one. I will give you each 30 seconds to respond to this one, and we'll start with the incumbent. Mr. Fox, why should voters re-elect you as state representative?
Thank you, Tim, and I appreciate Channel 12 and Newsmakers putting on this forum. I think the voters of District 4 know me, and this is the voters' seat. It's not my seat, it's your seat to the voters of District 4. And I believe in every 2 years I have to reapply for the job. And I believe through my record of providing leadership to tackle real problems in your lives, in my life, in this whole state of Rhode Island's lives, I deserve to be closely looked at, and I believe I deserve your vote for re-election to this seat. Whether it's dealing with pension reform, opening up a system to make it a healthier retirement system, education formula, taking care of our schools, reopening Nathan Bishop School.
Mr. Speaker, your 30 seconds is up.
That's quick.
We'll discuss it. We'll discuss a lot of those issues coming up. Mr. Binder, the same question to you, but why should voters elect you as state representative?
I think the voters in District 4 should mark their ballot for Mark Binder because I am the best candidate for the job. Gordon Fox has been there for 20 years. He's responsible for the 38 Studios disaster. He says he's from the district. He says that he represents our values. But how does 38 Studios serve our district? How does blocking payday lending, which would have helped the poorest people in our district, benefit our district or serve our values? I think I'm the best candidate for the job, and I ask people to vote for me. All
right, Mr. Binder, thank you. And again, all of those issues on our sheets today to get into. And we're going to start first with with the pay-to-play allegations, Mr. Binder, that you brought up this week. You held a news conference on Thursday accusing Speaker Fox of engaging in these pay-to-play politics. You listed a few examples of the Speaker or his PAC accepting political donations from groups that received favorable treatment on Smith Hill. Can you back up your charges of quid pro quo with evidence, or is your real issue here about how this country's campaign finance system works?
I think that the campaign finance system isn't working very well, and if you look at the public records, the finance records, you see that Gordon Fox took money from the auto body industry before he voted on a bill that would have benefited them. That was something that the governor vetoed. He took money from the car wash industry after plucking out of the tax code tax on car washes, and he took money from GTEC and the gambling interests while working on the legislation on the vote, the proposition vote that's on the ballot. I don't think that, he's had a history of taking money from GTEC and with his law office in the past and paid the largest ethics fine in the history of Rhode Island. It seems to me to be a very similar use of money going in and votes going out.
Well, why wouldn't a business donate to someone after a vote, say, for one of your examples, if they like how a legislator treated them up in Smith Hill? Why wouldn't they donate to keep them in office? Why is that wrong?
I think it doesn't benefit our taxpayers, and I don't think it benefits the voters when the people who benefit from a particular bill contribute to a politician's campaign. That gives them a voice in how the politician is going to run.
So it seems you're throwing some of these things off the wall, but the original question was, do you have hard evidence of quid pro quo? They gave the Speaker money and he voted this way. Can you say with confidence that actually happened?
He took money before voting, he took money after voting, and he took money while working on legislation. I think that voters can make their own decision. I'm not a lawyer or a politician.
But can you prove that they bought their votes from Speaker Fox?
Can I prove that someone said something? I think that's up to the Speaker to say something.
Well, why don't we ask the Speaker on that? Look, you have a healthy war chest here, especially relative to your challenger. Why not just turn away these donations when you know that this kind of scrutiny or this kind of criticism is going to come your way?
You know, it's one of those things, campaign finance reform, and I would just say that in terms of Mr. Binder making these reckless, libelous allegations does not do anything for the public discourse of any of these issues, any of the factual issues. But I guess that's what you do when you don't have solutions to offer. You smear people, and it is smear campaign. I follow the law with campaign finance laws. Those reports that you use came directly from information reported from me. They're campaign contributions. Campaign finance is a fact of life. But there have been attempts to reform it. We need to discuss it and go forward and move forward and trying to clean it up and take away any perceptions. But it's a fact of life. I follow the law. I have never made any vote contingent upon anybody giving me a campaign contribution. Never have done it. But to sit here and then just throw this mud against the wall and then say, let me explain why it didn't occur, is reckless and libelous.
But in your position as Speaker, there are things that you could do to change how this stuff works. For instance, would you favor a rule prohibiting fundraisers in the last month of session?
Well, you mean, and we've gone back and forth on that, but you want to make sure that it's just not some sort of symbolic victory or Pyrrhic victory in terms of doing this. Does that just move it to some other time? One of the things that we need to talk about, and unfortunately it's one of those casualties of bad economics, is should there be some sort of public financing? Edie Agello, other people in reform government have talked about this for years, and there was some movement that we were actually trying to move towards a better way of doing finance, public finance of campaign.
Would you support public financing of campaigns?
I think it's something that it's been applied to the statewide candidates. I think it's something that should be relevant for statewide candidates because money in politics, I hate fundraising. It's a fact of life. I hate it. But it's a necessary part of life. Mr. Binder takes campaign contributions. As long as you legally and lawfully those, and you know that you are not doing anything wrong in terms of taking those contributions, I think it's appropriate on our current system. The economics have prevented a further discussion of public finance of campaigns, and I'm hoping with a better economy as we see that we're coming out of the recession, I think it's relevant to have those discussions.
All right, Mr. Binder, I let Mr. Fox go a little bit longer in that section. Is there anything you want to respond to, or specifically, would you also support publicly financed campaigns?
I think that the cost of the deals that have been made as a result of these contributions is greater than the benefit to the taxpayers. And I think that blaming the economy for not putting forward legislation to change it, blaming, you know, the Speaker has, as the Speaker, he has the power to bring bills out. I don't understand why that power hasn't been used to change these things over the last few years.
And would you support publicly financed campaigns?
Sure.
Okay. Ted?
Mr. Fox, when you became Speaker, the unemployment rate was 11.8%. 2.5 years later, it's still 10.5%, only a little more than a percentage point better by any objective standard. Doesn't that mean the policies you put in place, working with the governor and the Senate president, are much too slow?
Well, that presumes that to a large portion that a state in and of itself can control a lot of dynamics. You know, and we all know that this economy has changed. Not only is it a national economy, it is now subject to global. I mean, when would we ever thought that a financial crisis in Greece would affect business in Rhode Island and across the country? So I think we have taken steps, and I think we are a healthier system by learning on it in terms of talking about better education. Long-term economic development is about preparing a workforce second to none. Rhode Island has some distinct advantages from being small. We face it, we have some liabilities as well. We're not going to be North Carolina, being able to give a lot of land grants to bring companies in, but I think we have to do, and a lot of it is embedded in the RIPEC report, which we are going to have hearings for as soon as practicable, and deal with that in terms of customer-oriented, trying to take care of business regulation. We have put together a small business committee that's looking at fire code and has made some changes there, looking at speeding up building permits, knowing how important the building trades are to our economy.
Let me press you right there that you say as soon as practicable on the EDC report. If I'm one of the 60,000 unemployed Rhode Islanders, yesterday is as soon as practical. Why aren't my lawmakers holding hearings right now? Why aren't they having they had a special session on pensions, but they won't have a special session on unemployment?
And that's great, because practically speaking, we are in a lame duck session. I mean, we have a finance committee, which will be the committee that this will be sent to. I've talked to Chairman Mello about trying to hold hearings right after the election into November, into December, but you are going to have a brand new legislature. It is what the Constitution provides for. So do you start practicable, I say, do you start hearings with people that may not be reelected? So you then rekindle those hearings and start in January again? It's about doing it right. And it may not be a speedy process, but you want to have a successful process.
Chairman Mello being House Finance Committee Chairman Helio Mello. Mr. Binder, you're critical, obviously, of Mr. Fox, and you've suggested new thinking is needed on the economy. If you were elected, what would be your top priority for legislation to improve the economy here?
My top priority is to improve education, and that's something that Mr. Fox says that he is going to do. But the actions that he's taken over the last year, combining the Board of Higher Education and the Board of Regents in a late night vote, he talks about not rushing things, and then they rush things at the end of the session. The process by which this government works doesn't work for the state, and it doesn't work for the taxpayers. Over the 10 years that he's been in the leadership, the budget for the University of Rhode Island has been cut by more than 30%. I don't see that being a way to provide for an educated and informed workforce. It's going to take time.
But again, that sounds like a long-term project. 60,000 Rhode Islanders are unemployed right now. Do you have any ideas, any bills you would put forward that you think could get people to work faster?
I am a freshman incoming. I don't have those policy things on hand.
Mr. Binder, Mr. Fox has pledged to call a vote on same-sex marriage legislation in the new legislative session beginning in 2013. He says he hopes this will happen before the end of January. Why would someone like you be better positioned to move forward same-sex marriage legislation rather than your opponent, who's on a first-name basis with every other lawmaker on Smith Hill?
If the only thing on the table is same-sex marriage, then absolutely the Speaker of the House, whoever that Speaker is, can put it forward. Gordon Fox has had 2 years to put that forward, and he has declined to do it for whatever reasons he has.
He says that it was important to first establish a floor with civil unions. Do you find that reasoning faulty?
There have been 52 couples in the last 2 years who have gotten a civil union in the state of Rhode Island. It doesn't seem to be a very good floor.
Mr. Fox, we know the Senate is the main hurdle to passing same-sex marriage legislation. What is your strategy for getting people like Senate President Teresa Pavlidis and Senate Judiciary Chairman Michael McCaffrey to support a same-sex marriage bill?
The key is, and I think the first step is to get it out of the House of Representatives. And when you, Mr. Binder, you talk about those 52 people. Well, those 52 people, 20 of whom I'm sure had came to see me, one couple, 6973, telling me, looking me in the eye, unlike what you can do, get married, opposite sex marriage, you have those rights immediately. I'm a gay man, and there were gay men that came to see me, lesbians that came to see me, older couples say, we're running out of time. Give us the rights now.
Let's come
so
back
that's where the civil unions came into it.
Okay.
But what's going to happen, which is the first and foremost, and I appreciate, now that we have the rights, now the rights are there, which is equivalent, except for one word term, the rights are there. But codifying separate is never equal. So the key is to get a vote out of the House and apply the pressure on the Senate.
I'd like to stop you there. Are you prepared to personally lobby people like Michael McCaffrey and Senate President Pavlidis to support a same-sex marriage bill?
I am. Absolutely.
Mr. Binder, before I move on to the next question, you look like you had something to say.
Yeah, he says that the first order of business is to move it out of the House. He's had years to do it.
He's right, isn't he?
Well, practically speaking, and it's a Hobson's choice, as my father used to say. There was an opportunity to give the rights now, or to force a vote.
But you cast it as an either or, Mr. Speaker.
But it wasn't either or, because it would never have gotten out of the Senate if I had, and when you know about building coalitions, and you folks know that, keeping votes together, that's leadership. The coalition would fall apart. So I had to make a determination, do I sacrifice what is fair and equal for politics, or do I provide leadership to get the rights now? And I chose to get the rights now.
Mr. Binder, before we move on, I don't want to assume everyone at home knows where you stand on this issue. You are for same-sex marriage.
I'm for same-sex marriage, and I will demand a vote as soon as we get in.
Let's keep it with you, Mr. Binder.
Sure.
You would think that if anyone was going to throw the Speaker of the House under the bus over the issue of 38 studios, it could be former Republican Governor Don Carcieri. But he said to me in the studio, quote, "I don't blame the General Assembly, not at all. Their job is to pass laws. They passed a law creating a loan guarantee program. It was the EDC's responsibility to oversee that. If he isn't blaming Speaker Fox for what happened, why should you?"
I think that the narrative of the evolution of 38 Studios is clear. Michael Corso, Gordon Fox, and Curt Schilling meet, and this thing starts to come together. There's a bill from the EDC that's been languishing in committee for years. It's plucked out of the committee. It's $75 million is added to it. It's brought before the legislature in a late night, last minute vote. The legislators all say that they didn't know what was in it. Speaker Fox now says that everybody in the building knew what was in it. He's denied that he knew what was in it, that it was earmarked for 38 studios. He says that's not our job, but we knew that it was for 38 studios. He's kind of going back and forth on that. And then when the whole House of Cards comes down, he just walks away and says somebody else was supposed to be counting the numbers.
In your opening statement, you said very clearly that the Speaker Fox is responsible, was the word that you used, for 38 studios.
Exactly. It would
is
not
he
have
the
come
only
to a
guy
vote.
that's holding the bag on this
It would not have
controversy?
come to a vote if Speaker Fox hadn't made it happen. I can say that with absolute authority. It would not have come to a vote.
Mr. Fox, your response?
Well, how convenient of him. Obviously, he has no idea, so it's all about, again, the theme here is to smear everything upon me. Do you blame Governor Kucheri for having a role here?
Absolutely.
The key was we created a program. I did not pick the company. I did not vet the decision to give them. I did not pick the amount. That did languish. It was a program because of past difficulties with past leadership, but we knew then, facing a loss of 32,000 jobs in 2 years, unemployment, as you said, Ted, 11.9, sky's the limit at that point, the economy in whitewater. Something had to happen, and we created a tool. The EDC asked for this tool repeatedly previously, you are correct, and it wasn't given to them. The time was right to give them the tool, but ultimately they vetted the 38 application. They were the ones charged with monitoring it, promised that they would monitoring, as the governor who served as chair has said before this, the three of you when he appeared on this show.
He is saying that it is laughable for a lot of, for anyone to say that you weren't aware that the lion's share of that loan guarantee program wasn't going to go to Curt Schilling and the video game company. And the press at that time was reporting on these meetings going on.
Everyone knew that Curt Schilling was in. There was a report in the Providence Journal in March of that year. This was approved in May. In March, everyone knew that Curt Schilling was interested in tax incentives, loan programs. It was reported in the Providence Journal. That's what I mean when I'm saying. So I've been completely consistent with this. But again, you couldn't earmark it. And again, Mr. Binder wants to talk about earmark, another untruth. It was not earmarked in the bill because that would have been inappropriate. On the separation of powers, you have the duty charge with the EDC, who came to us saying create this program, testified in front of cameras, in-house finance, that we have a system to monitor, we have a system to vet. The key here now is we need to find out, and we will, through the context of hearings on economic development as we go through, to see what went wrong, how is it vetted, is the program even appropriate, but not in the context of finger pointing, name calling, but how do we go forward as we try to solve our economic difficulties in this state and move forward in a positive manner.
Mr. Binder, final word on this?
I think it's pretty clear how it went wrong. Everybody knows where it went wrong. The problem is, how did it get started? And the way it got started was poorly. He says it wasn't earmarked, but $50 million plus $75 million equals $125 million. Here, guys, vote on it. Oh, no, we're not going to talk about it. Just vote on it, and somebody else will clean up the mess.
Mr. Binder, you can read. You take that legislation. An earmark means it's designated in the legislation that thou shalt give X to this company. It is nowhere to be found. That's the truth. You need to
strong enough for you,
need to
Mr.
tell
Binder?
the truth.
I didn't say it was. I never said it was an earmark.
You just said it was
did
an
I say
earmark.
All right, let's call it an add-on. How about that? We're just going to add on $75 million. We don't really know what it's for, but we're going to trust this organization. We're going to pretend we don't know what it's for. How about that? Is that better?
No, that's not better, because again, you're a great storyteller. Now you're telling tall tales. You're telling tall tales because you're presuming facts, not in evidence. I don't know who you talk to, where you come up with these notions, but it's mudslinging. And again, it's not adding to the debate. Talk positive, but where do we go forward?
Okay.
Unemployment's high.
Positive.
How do you move forward? How do you develop skills training program? That's what I'm about, problem solving to make people's lives better.
I am positive that last-minute votes without debate don't work for our government and don't work for our taxpayers. And I think that is a high priority that Gordon Fox said in January that he wasn't going to do, and he broke his promise on that one.
No,
and
and
did
again, you were wrong on that
Mr.
one.
Speaker, we need to move on. Let's talk more about last-minute votes. Mr. Fox, you told the Providence Journal that you directed that a bill capping payday loans should be removed from the list of bills to be considered at the end of the session. Why did you do that, and why not allow an up or down vote?
Well, that was not this. It was the previous session, because this is an issue it's a product that I wouldn't use. We don't have payday lenders on the east side in District 4 because they're not needed, because there's other avenues. So there's really a broader issue here about why do people who find themselves in financial situations have to go to this project. You also have a backstop that we don't live in a borderless society. The internet and there are mail order and television payday lenders that even are more egregious. So trying to work on a solution became either lower the interest rate and put people out of business, as their argument went, or allow them to continue the program as it was. Senator Josh Miller took the lead on working on this. Other people like Frank Ferry on the House side took the leadership on working on this. And unlike what Mr. Binder wants to say, I don't believe in top-down government works. It's got to be legislative driven. Senator Miller came up with a real solution. Capping the number of loans, coming up with a database so that people weren't taking multiple loans from multiple vendors. The testimony showed that there were people that would go to multiple vendors.
What you left out is that your predecessor, Billy Murphy, was the lobbyist for the payday loaners. So how can you say that doesn't affect
former House Speaker William Murphy?
Who they hired as their lobbyists. Again, that's part of Mr. Binder talking about pay-to-play scheme. I don't know what they paid Bill Murphy. I'm not making decisions because former Speaker Murphy's saying you shouldn't do something that may or may not be correct. I would never, nor have I ever, if something's not right or if there's not a disparate view on something, kill a bill because some lobbyist told me to. There are different ways of looking at this issue. There are solutions that were offered that were unacceptable to, quite frankly, both sides on the issue. And then it got very personal about allegations of a rep being family related, of this business,
I want to hear
of
Mr.
that
Binder
business.
on this
It got
issue,
to be
please.
filthy, quite frankly.
Thank you, Mr. Fox.
Mr. Binder, respond to that. You've been critical of this.
The Speaker says that there aren't any payday lending facilities in our district, and he's actually right. If you walk across the street from our district into Pawtucket, near where the Shaws used to be, there's a payday lending thing. So people can walk right over there. And the rate remains at 260% interest. Okay, to be honest, I don't care if those businesses stay in business. I don't care if people go online. I don't think that the state of Rhode Island should allow it within our borders. And to be honest, I suspect that there's probably regulation that we could put in to prohibit the use of that stuff over the internet, but I don't know. I'm not a lawyer or a politician yet.
Mr. Binder, let me ask you a different question related to this, though. Sure. Speaker Fox is clearly very powerful. What makes you think that replacing him with you and obviously a new speaker coming in would make the House of Representatives a more progressive place?
I'm not running for Speaker of the House. I think that replacing him would make a difference because part of what this campaign has become about, and part of what I'm passionate about, is the idea of changing the way our government does business. If another speaker comes in and operates the same way, I think that speaker is going to become vulnerable to their voters and to someone else like me saying, hey, this is wrong. So maybe we can stop this practice of having the money coming in and the votes going out, of having these last-minute deals and these late-night sessions. It doesn't work for the state. It doesn't work for the taxpayers. It costs us money.
Right. Mr. Binder, would you have been a yes vote on the state's historic pension overhaul of 2011?
That is one of those questions that if I was a politician, I would tap dance wildly about. The answer is, I don't know. My wife is a school teacher. She has part of the state pension program, and to be honest, I feel like we've gone back on our word to the people who are pensioners, but we're not going to go back on our word to the bondholders from 38 studios.
If the proposal was before you now, would you be a yes or no on it?
I'd have to read it.
And
I can't do that.
I'm not going to. Yeah. I'm sorry. This has been pretty widely reported. Mm-hmm. Everyone has, knows about what the ins and outs of this. By saying I don't know, with all due respect, that is tap dancing. As a legislature, you're going to have to hit the red light or the green light. You know enough about this pension reform law, or I hope you do.
Okay.
Yes or no?
Actually, at this point, I'm going to abstain because I have a long conversation.
That is another option.
Does your opponent deserve any credit for helping to shepherd that legislation?
He's certainly taken credit for it.
Does he deserve credit for it?
there's a long conversation that we can have, and it's been written about
Can
whether
you give me
the
a yes or no
whether the
answer on that?
crisis.
Can you give me a yes or
Does
no
he
answer
deserve
on whether
credit for it?
Yes.
I'll abstain.
Mr. Fox, Teachers Union head Robert Walsh says he's very confident that courts are going to throw out the pension overhaul. What is the plan B if that happens?
We go back to the drawing board. But the key was, and that's the difference between Mark, you and me, I don't have the luxury of abstaining. Not as the representative from District 4, knowing the numbers, how they were working, knowing that a vulnerable system would long-term not be there to protect the very people like your wife who hopefully will get a pension from doing good work in the schools.
What about
it's about solving problems.
What about, isn't this going back on a promise made to teachers and public employees?
It was a promise made in the era where little by little got to be a system that couldn't be afforded anymore. You mean, when our children are young, we may promise that they're going to have a Harvard education, but you may not be able to deliver. You have to look them in the eye, and I did that as speaker. There was speakers before me that did not deal with this issue, but looking at a system, $3.5 billion in state resources in the budget, $1 billion within the near future would go to making our annual retirement contributions. How do you fund public safety? How do you provide for good schools? How do you pay for the future if you're dealing with the past? So we did, working as what was legally permissible, to put together, cull together a pension reform plan that makes a healthier system, protects pensioners, and saves money. All with a through a prism of doing the least we had to do in terms of hurting the recipients. I understand that this hurt folks and it took things away, but we had a concrete example, Central Falls. I had people coming to my office 80 years old, 39,000 lost because of bankruptcy, down to 5,000. Were those people given a service? Do we want that to happen to someone when they're 85 with no options? It was the right thing to do. The people needed it, and we advocated, and we got it done. That's problem solving.
We have less than 2 minutes, if you can believe it, in this program left, so I need to go through a series of yes or no questions now.
Wow.
No,
like
candidates always love this section. We'll start with you, Mr. Binder. Yes or no, should the state consider defaulting on the 38 studios bond? Yes. Speaker?
It's an option.
And Speaker, with you, do you support a push by many mayors for expanded use of publicly funded charter schools? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Binder?
I have a convoluted position, so the answer is abstain at this time.
Mr. Binder, do you support Rhode Island's new voter ID law requiring
Absolutely
people to...
not.
And Mr. Fox?
Needs revisions.
Okay, and you said absolutely not in the quick time we have here. Why do you oppose it so vehemently?
Rhode Island is the only Democratic state in the Union to pass a voter ID law. It makes it harder for people to vote in person and easier to vote by absentee, and there have been cases of absentee ballot fraud that have been documented, but no cases of in-person voter fraud documented in Rhode Island.
Within 15 seconds, anything in there that you agree with?
We heard evidence to the contrary. The bill supported by the minority caucus of all, with the Secretary of State making it one of the least restrictive voter ID laws going. There are provisional that lead to 13. Why I say it needs revision, I would like to see, and the thing that was left out is a sunset. To force a future legislature to take a look at it, take hearings to see how was it effective in the last 2 cycles, and that's something I'll work on when we get back.
The election is November 6th. This is House District 4 in Providence on the east side. The candidates are Independent Mark Binder and Democratic House Speaker Gordon Fox. I want to thank you for watching Newsmakers. For Ian Donnis and Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.